10 countries where Canadians might face travel restrictions. Traveling to some countries isn't as simple as booking a ticket, especially if you're Canadian. What could make a country restrict your visit? In today's video, we're diving into 10 countries where Canadians might face travel restrictions. From political tensions to security risks, these destinations come with challenges that could mess up your trip. Stick around till the end. Number 10. Syria. Since the civil war broke out as far back as 2011, Syria has never really been the same. It has become a country plagued by conflict after conflict, and it is currently too dangerous for Canadians to visit. The Canadian government warns against all travel to Syria due to the high risks involved. The war has caused widespread destruction, with bombings and armed clashes happening in many cities. Both government forces and various rebel groups are fighting, making the country unsafe for foreigners. Canadians are at risk of being caught in the crossfire or even targeted by one of the armed groups. Syria's healthcare system has collapsed, and with no Canadian embassy in the country, getting help has become nearly impossible. After the kidnapping incident, it became clear how unsafe it is for Canadians to be in such a hostile environment. Number 9. South Sudan. South Sudan is one of the most unstable countries in the world right now, and the Canadian government strongly advises against all travel there. Since its independence in 2011, South Sudan has faced ongoing violence and civil war, making it a very dangerous destination for Canadians. Fighting between government forces and rebel groups has led to widespread violence, including attacks on civilians. Many areas of South Sudan are affected by this, and no one is safe in Sudan, especially foreign nationals who face all types of danger, ranging from kidnappings, ambushes, and random shootings. Know what's worse? The country's healthcare system is also severely underdeveloped. Hospitals are in short supply, and the available medical care is limited. With no Canadian embassy in South Sudan, it's nearly impossible to get help if something goes wrong. Is it worth visiting a country where safety is so uncertain? Number 8. Yemen. Yemen is a country in crisis, and it has been so since 2014. The country, just like Syria, has been stuck in a civil war, and the fighting has only gotten worse. The war has caused serious instability across the country. There are frequent bombings and gun battles, particularly in cities like Sana'a. Foreigners, including Canadians, are at risk of being caught in the crossfire or even targeted. Basic services like healthcare have been heavily affected by the war. Many hospitals and clinics have been destroyed, and it's hard to get help if you're injured or sick. There is also no Canadian embassy here in Yemen, so what would you do if you're in an emergency? Number 7. Afghanistan. For anyone thinking of visiting Afghanistan, you might want to reconsider after watching this. After the Taliban took control in 2021, the country's safety quickly declined. Things are unstable, and jetting down to the country right now is like walking into fire. In the summer of 2021, as the Taliban moved through the country, many people rushed to the airport in Kabul to flee. Canadian citizens found themselves stuck, with reports of shootings, chaos, and violence as they tried to escape. This event left a lot of Canadians stranded, facing a lot of danger without any clear way out. The dangers don't stop there. Afghanistan has become a hotspot for violent attacks, including bombings and shootings, often targeting civilians. Terrorist groups are active, and kidnapping for ransom remains a serious threat. Why take the risk when the dangers are so high? Number 6. Belarus. Belarus isn't the easiest country for Canadians to visit. Political tensions and human rights issues have put a strain on relations. After the controversial 2020 presidential elections, Canada criticized the Belarusian government for its harsh crackdown on protests and lack of basic freedoms. As a result, sanctions were placed on officials and entities tied to the regime. Things worsened when Belarus used irregular migration to pressure the European Union, which Canada also condemned. These actions led to even stricter sanctions. On top of this, Belarus's involvement in Russia's conflict with Ukraine has raised more security concerns. For Canadians, this means tighter surveillance, the risk of arbitrary detention, and unpredictable situations. With such risks and ongoing political instability, would you feel safe exploring a place like Belarus? Number 5. Venezuela. Venezuela has been facing a lot of problems for years. Because of violence, protests, and a lack of basic things like food and medicine, the Canadian government warns Canadians not to travel there. It is very dangerous. A real example of how risky Venezuela can be for Canadians happened in 2018. Terry, a Canadian, was arrested while visiting Venezuela. Terry was in the country to help with humanitarian work, providing aid to people who were suffering because of the country's political and economic problems. However, things went badly when the Venezuelan government accused him of being involved in anti-government activities. Even though Terry was just there to help people, he was arrested and locked in prison for several months. His case attracted a lot of attention around the world. This situation shows how unpredictable things can get in Venezuela and how Canadians, or anyone, can be caught up in political problems. With the government targeting foreigners, especially those involved in activism, it's clear why Canadians should avoid traveling to Venezuela. The risks of being caught in political conflicts or even facing arrest are very real. Number 4. Saudi Arabia. If you're thinking of visiting Saudi Arabia, there are a few things you should know. While it's a popular destination for business and religious reasons, especially for those traveling for Hajj, Canadians might face some travel restrictions. This is because of a dip in relations between Canada and Saudi Arabia, largely due to human rights concerns. The Saudi government is strict about its laws and customs. Women, for example, are expected to wear modest clothing and follow the local dress codes. Both men and women need to be careful about their behavior in public, as violating local customs can lead to fines or even detention. For Canadians, there's also the challenge of limited consular services. If something goes wrong while you're there, getting help could be difficult, especially since the Canadian embassy in Riyadh is not as accessible due to the strained relationship. Even though traveling to Saudi Arabia isn't outright banned, it'd be better to steer clear of the country. Number 3. Iran. Iran has a complicated relationship with Canada, which can make travel to the country risky. Diplomatic tensions between the two nations have been high for years, especially after Canada suspended diplomatic relations with Iran in 2012. Understandably, the relationship between both countries has been strained since then. One of the biggest concerns for Canadians is the risk of arbitrary detention. There have been instances where foreigners, including Canadians, have been arrested without clear reasons or accused of being involved in anti-government activities. Iran also has strict laws, especially regarding dress codes for women and restrictions on social behavior. Canadians may also face difficulties in obtaining consular assistance in Iran. Due to the lack of a Canadian embassy, getting help in an emergency is challenging. Not a situation you'd particularly like to be in. Number 2. North Korea. North Korea is one of the most isolated countries in the world, and they are mostly left alone. The country is known for its strict control over visitors, and the government monitors foreigners closely. Canadians are strongly advised to avoid traveling to North Korea, as the risk of arrest or detention is high, especially if you accidentally break the country's strict rules. Even something as simple as taking an unauthorized photo can lead to serious consequences, and before you can say jack, you'll find yourself in jail. That isn't all. North Korea is also unpredictable, with constant changes to its policies and regulations. This makes it difficult to know exactly what to expect while traveling there. So, how about you save yourself from the mental gymnastics and just avoid the country? Easy, right? Number 1. Russia. Russia at number 1 is no surprise, right? Quite a number of countries, including Canada, have imposed sanctions on Russia. mainly because of Russia's actions in Ukraine, especially the annexation of Crimea in 2014. In light of that, traveling to Russia is tricky for Canadians due to strained relations. The consular services available to Canadians in Russia are also very limited, and you'd be on your own if you ever got into trouble here. Russia also imposes strict rules on foreigners, and visiting certain regions close to conflict zones, like the eastern parts of Ukraine, is considered dangerous. You might also face unnecessary delays at airports or possible detention. For Canadians, it's important to check the latest travel advisories before considering a trip to Russia. Overall, while it's not banned, the risks involved make it a country that requires serious thought before traveling. If you think about it long and hard enough, you'll realize it might not really be an experience you want to go through. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to stay updated with our next release. See you soon.